Bullies pulled her hoodie to humiliate. She flipped them both instantly. The fluorescent lights of Lincoln High School buzzed overhead as Zara Novak pulled her oversized grey hoodie tighter around her thin frame. Her dark hair fell like a curtain across her face, obscuring the sharp intelligence in her brown eyes as she navigated the crowded hallway. Students rushed past her in clusters, their voices echoing off the linoleum floors, but none acknowledged her presence. She preferred it that way, or at least that's what she told herself. Zara had transferred to Lincoln High 3 months ago when her father's job relocated their family from Chicago to this mid-sized town in Ohio. The adjustment had been difficult, made worse by her naturally quiet demeanor and the fact that she stood barely 5 feet tall with a frame that seemed to disappear inside her baggy clothes. Her accent, still tinged with traces of her grandmother's Polish heritage, made her stand out even more among her classmates. She clutched her worn backpack straps and quickened her pace toward her locker, hoping to avoid any unwanted attention. The morning routine had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance, timing her movements to miss the groups of students who seemed to find entertainment in her discomfort. "Well, well, look what crawled out of the shadows," a voice boomed behind her. Zara's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice immediately, Trevor Matthews, the unofficial king of Lincoln High's social hierarchy. At 6 feet tall, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confident swagger that came from years of being the star quarterback, Trevor commanded attention wherever he went. His Letterman jacket hung perfectly on his broad shoulders, and his blue eyes held a cruel glint that Zara had learned to fear. She didn't turn around, instead focusing on the combination lock of her locker. Maybe if she ignored him, he would move on to someone else. But her hands shook as she spun the dial, the numbers blurring together. "I'm talking to you, ghost girl," Trevor said, his voice closer now. His friend Jake Williams snickered beside him, a tall, lanky boy who served as Trevor's eager accomplice in most of his schemes. Jake's red hair was buzzed short, and his freckled face always seemed to wear a mocking expression. Zara finally managed to open her locker, but before she could grab her books, Trevor's large hand slammed it shut with a loud bang that echoed through the hallway. Several students turned to look, but none moved to help. They had learned long ago that intervening in Trevor's games only made you his next target. "You know, it's rude to ignore people when they're talking to you," Trevor said, positioning himself directly in front of her locker. His height forced Zara to crane her neck to look up at him, which only emphasized the power dynamic between them. "I'm sorry," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible above the hallway noise. "I didn't hear you." Jake laughed, a harsh sound that made Zara flinch. "She didn't hear you, Trevor. Maybe we need to speak louder." "Yeah, maybe we do," Trevor agreed, his voice rising dramatically. "Hey everyone, look at Ghost Girl. She's so tiny she needs help reaching her locker." The hallway fell silent for a moment as students turned to stare. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks as dozens of eyes focused on her. She tried to shrink further into her hoodie, but there was nowhere to hide. "Leave her alone, Trevor," a voice called out from across the hall. Zara's heart skipped as she recognized the voice of Marcus Chen, a student in her AP literature class. Marcus was everything she wasn't: tall, confident, and effortlessly popular. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, and his warm brown eyes seemed to see through people's facades. He was also one of the few students who had ever shown her any kindness, offering to share his notes when she missed class with a cold. Trevor's expression darkened as he turned toward Marcus. "Oh, look who's playing White Knight. What's it to you, Chen?" Marcus stepped closer, his jaw set with determination. "It's called basic human decency. You should try it sometime." The tension in the hallway became palpable. Students formed a loose circle around the confrontation, sensing drama. Zara felt sick to her stomach, knowing that her problems had now become Marcus's problems. "You know what?" Trevor said, his voice dangerously quiet. I think Ghost Girl here needs to learn what happens when she gets other people involved in her business. Before Zara could react, Trevor grabbed the hood of her sweatshirt and yanked it back hard. The sudden motion jerked her backward, and she stumbled, her backpack falling to the floor with a loud thud. Books scattered across the linoleum, and her carefully organized notes flew everywhere. But that wasn't the worst part. When Trevor pulled her hood back, he exposed what Zara had been hiding underneath, a large, jagged scar that ran from her left temple down to her jawline. The scar was a pale, raised line against her olive skin, a permanent reminder of the car accident that had killed her mother 2 years ago. The hallway erupted in gasps and whispers. Students who had been watching with mild interest now stared with open shock and morbid curiosity. Zara heard fragments of their conversations. "Oh my God, did you see that? What happened to her face? No wonder she always wears that hoodie." Zara's vision blurred with tears as she frantically tried to pull her hood back up, but Trevor wasn't finished. He grabbed her wrist, preventing her from covering herself. "Well, well," he said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "No wonder you hide under that thing. You look like something out of a horror movie." Jake cackled with laughter, and several other students joined in. The sound was like knives in Zara's chest. She had spent months building up the courage to attend this school, and now her worst nightmare was coming true. "That's enough," Marcus said firmly, stepping between Trevor and Zara. "Back off, man." Trevor's eyes flashed with anger. "Or what? You'll make me." "If I have to." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity to Zara. Finally, Trevor released her wrist and stepped back, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "This isn't over, Chen. And you," he pointed at Zara, "next time think twice before getting your boyfriend involved." With that, Trevor and Jake walked away, leaving Zara to collect her scattered belongings while trying to ignore the continued stares and whispers of her classmates. Marcus knelt down to help her gather her books, his expression filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Zara nodded quickly, not trusting her voice. She pulled her hood back up and stuffed her books into her backpack with shaking hands. "Hey," Marcus said gently, "don't let them get to you. Trevor's just a coward who picks on people to make himself feel better." For a moment, Zara looked up at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him pause. It wasn't just hurt or fear. There was something else, something that seemed almost dangerous. "Thank you," she whispered, then hurried away before he could respond. The rest of the day passed in a blur of humiliation. Word of the hallway incident spread quickly through the school's social networks, and Zara found herself the subject of stares and whispers wherever she went. Some students looked at her with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with barely concealed disgust. In her chemistry class, someone had written FREAK on her lab table. During lunch, she sat alone in the far corner of the cafeteria, picking at her sandwich while trying to ignore the groups of students who would glance her way and then lean in to whisper to their friends. The scar on her face felt like it was burning under their scrutiny. But the worst part was seeing Marcus in the hallway between classes. He tried to catch her eye, probably wanting to check on her, but Zara couldn't bear to face him. She had brought him into her mess, and now Trevor would probably target him too. That evening, Zara sat in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The scar stood out starkly against her pale skin, a permanent reminder of the night that had changed everything. She traced it with her finger, remembering the screech of tires, the sound of shattering glass, and the moment when her world had fallen apart. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice face, freak. Can't wait to see what other surprises you're hiding." Zara deleted the message, but 3 more appeared within minutes. Then 5 more. Someone had gotten her number and shared it, and now the harassment was following her home. She turned off her phone and walked to her closet, pushing aside the hanging clothes to reveal a large duffel bag hidden in the back corner. With trembling hands, she unzipped it and stared at the contents. A collection of martial arts uniforms, trophies and medals that told a story she had never shared with anyone at Lincoln High. Before the accident, before the scar, before the crushing depression that had followed her mother's death, Zara had been a different person. She had been a national champion in mixed martial arts, trained from the age of 5 by her father, who had been a professional fighter in Poland before immigrating to America. She had been confident, fierce, and unafraid of anything. But after the accident, after months of surgeries and physical therapy, after watching her father struggle to hold their family together, Zara had walked away from it all. She had packed away her uniforms, ignored her coach's calls, and chosen to become invisible instead of invincible. The next morning brought fresh horrors. Someone had printed out a photo of her scar from social media and taped copies to her locker. The image was grainy and distorted, making her look even more damaged than she felt. Students gathered around her locker, laughing and pointing, and Zara had to push through the crowd to reach her books. "Hey, Scarface," Jake called out as she walked past. "Halloween's not for another 6 months." Trevor appeared at her side, his presence looming over her like a shadow. "You know, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I don't think you learned your lesson." Zara kept walking, clutching her books to her chest. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly in front of her, filled with hostile faces and cruel laughter. "I'm talking to you," Trevor said, grabbing her shoulder and spinning her around. "When someone's trying to help you understand your place in the world, you should pay attention." "Please," Zara whispered, "I just want to go to class." "Oh, she speaks," Jake said mockingly. "What's wrong, Scarface? Don't like the attention?" Trevor's hand moved to her hood, and Zara's body tensed. She couldn't go through yesterday's humiliation again, not in front of all these people. "Don't," she said, her voice slightly stronger. "Don't what?" Trevor asked, his fingers gripping the fabric. "Don't do this?" He yanked her hood back again, exposing her scar to the gathered crowd. This time, Zara didn't stumble. She stood perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on Trevor's face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "There she is," he said, trying to maintain his confident tone. "The real you. Why don't you tell everyone how you got that beautiful scar?" The words hit Zara like physical blows. The scar represented the worst night of her life, the moment when everything she had known and loved was ripped away. For Trevor to mock it, to use her trauma as entertainment, was more than she could bear. Something shifted inside her. The fear and shame that had dominated her thoughts for months began to recede, replaced by something that felt like molten steel in her veins. She remembered her father's voice during training. "When your opponent underestimates you, that's when you have the greatest advantage." "You want to know how I got it?" Zara asked, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet hallway. Trevor nodded eagerly, sensing a victory. "Yeah, I think we'd all like to hear the story." "Car accident," Zara said simply. 2 years ago, my mother died, and I spent 3 months in the hospital." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the entertainment they had expected. Even Trevor seemed taken aback by her directness. "But you know what the interesting thing is?" Zara continued, taking a step closer to Trevor. "The accident didn't just give me this scar. It also taught me that there are worse things than being hurt, like being the kind of person who hurts others for fun." Trevor's face flushed red. "Are you calling me a—" "I'm not calling you anything," Zara interrupted. "I'm just saying that if you think a scar makes someone weak, you might want to reconsider your definition of strength." For a moment, the hallway was completely silent. Then Trevor's anger exploded. "You little freak!" he snarled, raising his hand as if to strike her. But Zara was ready. Without thinking, her body moved into a defensive stance. her weight shifting to the balls of her feet, her hands coming up in a guard position that was as natural as breathing. Trevor's hand stopped mid-swing, confusion replacing anger on his face. Something in Zara's posture, in the way she held herself, sent a warning signal to his brain. "What the hell?" he muttered. The moment stretched between them, electric with tension. Then the bell rang, and the spell was broken. Students began moving toward their classes, and Trevor lowered his hand, his face still twisted with confusion and rage. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Zara pulled her hood back up and walked away, but she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes following her. Something had changed in that hallway, and everyone sensed it. The rest of the week passed in a strange, tense calm. Trevor and Jake continued their harassment, but there was something different about it now. They seemed to be testing her, probing for weaknesses, but Zara no longer flinched at their words. She had remembered who she used to be, and that knowledge was like armor against their cruelty. She also noticed that Marcus had been watching her more carefully. He would nod when he saw her in the hallway, and once he even smiled when she helped answer a question in their shared literature class. The attention both thrilled and terrified her. On Thursday afternoon, Zara was walking to her car after school when she heard voices from the student parking lot. She recognized Marcus's voice immediately, and her stomach dropped when she realized he was arguing with Trevor. "You need to leave her alone," Marcus was saying. "She's been through enough." "Oh, I get it," Trevor replied. "You think you're going to be her hero, going to save the damaged girl and make her fall in love with you?" "It's not like that," Marcus said, but Zara could hear the frustration in his voice. "She's a human being, Trevor. She deserves to be treated with respect." "Respect?" Trevor laughed harshly. "She's a freak who hides in hoodies and won't even look people in the eye. What's respectable about that?" Zara crept closer, staying hidden behind a row of parked cars. She could see Marcus standing next to his blue Honda, his face flushed with anger. Trevor and Jake flanked him, their body language aggressive and threatening. "You know what I think?" Trevor continued. "I think you're just as pathetic as she is. Maybe you deserve each other." "Maybe we do," Marcus said quietly. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. Marcus, kind, popular, perfect Marcus, had just aligned himself with her in front of the school's biggest bully. The gesture was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Trevor's expression darkened. Wrong answer. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Trevor shoved Marcus hard, sending him stumbling backward into his car. Jake moved to flank him from the other side, and Zara realized they were about to beat up the one person who had shown her kindness. She couldn't let that happen. Without thinking, Zara stepped out from behind the cars. "Stop!" she called out, her voice carrying across the parking lot. All three boys turned to look at her. Trevor's face broke into a cruel smile. "Well, well," he said. "Look who decided to join the party. Perfect timing, Scarface. You can watch your boyfriend get what's coming to him." "He's not my boyfriend," Zara said, walking closer. "And you're not going to touch him." Trevor laughed. "Oh, really? And what are you going to do about it, freak? Hide behind your hood some more?" Instead of answering, Zara reached up and pulled her hood down. The scar was clearly visible in the afternoon sunlight, but this time she didn't try to hide it. She stood straight, her shoulders back, and looked Trevor directly in the eye. "I'm going to ask you one more time," she said quietly. "Leave him alone." "Or what?" Trevor sneered. "You'll cry at me? Run to a teacher? Face it, Scarface. You're nothing. You're weak. You're ugly. And you're—" Trevor never finished his sentence. In one fluid motion, Zara closed the distance between them and grabbed his wrist, twisting it behind his back with a speed and precision that shocked everyone watching. Trevor cried out in pain and surprise as he found himself face down on the hood of a nearby car. "Let me go!" he shouted, struggling against her grip. The thing about scars, Zara said calmly, applying just enough pressure to keep him still, is that they don't make you weak. They make you remember what you survived. Jake stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. Marcus stared in amazement as this quiet, shy girl completely controlled the school's biggest bully with apparent ease. You want to know what I survived? Zara continued. I survived watching my mother die. I survived 3 months in the hospital. I survived learning to walk again. I survived depression so deep I didn't want to get out of bed for 6 months. And you know what? After all that, dealing with you is nothing. She released Trevor's wrist and stepped back. He spun around, his face red with rage and humiliation. You bitch! He screamed, lunging toward her. What happened next was like watching a master at work. Zara sidestepped Trevor's clumsy attack, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to flip him over her hip. He crashed to the asphalt with a sound that echoed across the parking lot, landing hard on his back with the wind knocked out of him. Jake, seeing his leader defeated, charged at Zara from the side. She spun to face him, her movements fluid and controlled. When he reached for her, she caught his wrist, pivoted, and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground next to Trevor with a painful thud. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Zara stood over both boys, breathing calmly while they groaned and struggled to get up. A crowd had gathered, students streaming out of the school building to see what the commotion was about. Their phones were out, recording everything. The next time you want to pick on someone, Zara said, loud enough for everyone to hear, make sure you know who you're dealing with. Trevor managed to sit up, his face twisted with pain and humiliation. You'll pay for this, he gasped. No, Zara said simply. I won't, because you're not going to bother me anymore. You're not going to bother Marcus, and you're not going to bother anyone else either. You can't. I can, Zara interrupted. Want to know why? Because I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid of anyone. And once word gets out about what happened here today, neither will anyone else. She was right. The video of the fight had already been uploaded to social media, and it was spreading through the school's network like wildfire. Students who had watched Trevor terrorize others for years were seeing him humiliated by a girl half his size. Trevor finally managed to stand, leaning heavily on a nearby car. His Letterman jacket was torn, and there was a scrape on his cheek where he had hit the asphalt. This isn't over, he said weakly. Yes, it is, Zara replied, and deep down, you know it. She turned to Marcus, who was still staring at her with amazement. Are you okay? He nodded slowly. I'm fine, but you... Where did you learn to do that? Long story, Zara said, pulling her hood back up. Maybe I'll tell you sometime. As the crowd began to disperse, Zara walked toward her car. She could feel the stares of her classmates, but they were different now. Instead of pity or mockery, she saw something that looked like respect. Zara, Marcus called out, jogging to catch up with her. Wait! She turned to face him, her heart pounding. After everything that had just happened, she wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation. Thank you, he said simply, for standing up for me. Nobody's ever done that before. You stood up for me first, Zara replied. In the hallway that day. You didn't have to, but you did. Marcus smiled, and Zara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Maybe we could get coffee sometime. I'd like to hear that long story. For the first time in months, Zara smiled back. I'd like that. The following Monday, Lincoln High School was a different place. The video of Zara's confrontation with Trevor had gone viral, not just within the school but throughout the district. Students who had been terrorized by Trevor for years were suddenly walking taller, knowing that their tormentor had been brought low by someone they had dismissed as weak. Trevor himself was a shadow of his former self. He still came to school, but the swagger was gone. He kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and spoke to no one unless spoken to first. Jake had transferred to a different school, unable to face the humiliation of being defeated so thoroughly. Zara, meanwhile, had undergone her own transformation. She still wore her hoodie, but she no longer hid behind it. She made eye contact when people spoke to her, participated in class discussions, and even joined the martial arts club that Marcus had suggested she start. The scar was still there, of course. It would always be there, a permanent reminder of the night that had changed everything. But it no longer defined her. Instead, it was just part of her story. A story of survival, of finding strength in the darkest places, and of learning that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. During lunch on Tuesday, Zara sat with Marcus and a small group of friends they had attracted. The conversation was light and easy, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. Across the cafeteria, she could see Trevor sitting alone, picking at his food and avoiding everyone's gaze. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You know," Marcus said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you said, about scars not making you weak." Zara looked at him, curious. "I think you're right," he continued. "I think they make you stronger, more real, more human." "Some scars are visible," Zara said, touching her cheek lightly. "Others aren't. But we all have them." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "We do." As the bell rang and students began filing out of the cafeteria, Zara caught sight of Trevor one more time. He was walking alone, his shoulders slumped, his confident mask completely gone. She wondered if he had learned anything from their confrontation, or if he would just find new ways to make others feel small. But that wasn't her responsibility anymore. She had spent too many years letting other people's cruelty define her world. Now she was focused on building something better, something authentic, something that honored both her scars and her strength. Later that afternoon, as Zara walked to her car, she noticed a younger student being cornered by a group of upperclassmen. The boy was small and obviously frightened, clutching his books to his chest, while the older students laughed and taunted him. For a moment, Zara hesitated. Getting involved would mean drawing attention to herself again, risking the careful balance she had built. But then she remembered Marcus's words about scars making you more human, and she knew what she had to do. "Hey," she called out, walking toward the group. "Is there a problem here?" The upperclassmen turned to look at her, and she saw the moment of recognition in their eyes. They had all seen the video. They knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. "No problem," one of them said quickly. "We were just talking." "Good," Zara said, her voice calm but firm, "because I'd hate to think that Lincoln High hadn't learned anything from recent events." The group dispersed quickly, leaving the younger student alone with Zara. He looked up at her with grateful eyes, and she saw something of herself in his frightened expression. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome," Zara replied. "What's your name?" "David," he said. "Well, David, here's some advice. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are. And if they try..." She smiled, and for the first time, the scar on her face didn't feel like a mark of shame. It felt like a badge of honor. "Well, let's just say you're not as alone as you think." As she walked away, Zara felt the weight of her transformation settling around her like a comfortable cloak. She had learned that strength wasn't about never being hurt. It was about what you did with the hurt once you had it. It was about choosing to protect others instead of protecting only yourself. It was about understanding that the most powerful weapon against cruelty was not more cruelty, but the courage to stand up and say, "Enough." The scar would always be there, marking her face and her history, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it was simply part of the story of who she had become, someone who had been broken and had chosen to heal, someone who had been made small and had chosen to stand tall, someone who had learned that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones who look the most harmless. And in a world full of bullies and victims, Zara had chosen to be something else entirely. A protector, a survivor, and proof that sometimes the quietest voices can roar the loudest when they finally decide to speak.